Manchester United summer signing Rasmus Hojlund is coming under a fair bit of heat right now, having gone 13 Premier League games without finding the back of the net since his potential £74 million move to Old Trafford. Admittedly, it's not the best start for a striker who costs more than either Erling Haaland or Victor Osimhen, though it is worth noting that the Dane is still only 20 years old. And he did manage to score 5 goals in 6 games as Erik ten Hag's side crashed out of the UEFA Champions League, finishing bottom of their group. To make Hojlund feel a little bit better about himself, or perhaps just even worse, I'm not quite sure, I thought that I would use him as my muse to take a look at some other supremely expensive signings who struggle to hit the ground running at their new clubs. And when I say struggle to hit the ground running, what I mean, of course, is that they were absolutely hopeless. Players like Danny Drinkwater, signed for £35 million by Chelsea in an act of performative stupidity, who made just 5 starts and 7 substitute appearances in his debut campaign, was anonymous in almost all of them, and was never seen of again. Or Jesse Rodriguez, who was a marquee €25 million signing by PSG back in the summer of 2016, but only made 14 appearances in his debut campaign, chipping in with a miserable 2-goal contributions. Even players who go on to enjoy great success at clubs are capable of making terrible starts, which is perhaps where the positivity for Hojlund might come in. David De Gea, for example, was branded a flop and dropped in his first season at Manchester United after Alex Ferguson had made him the most expensive goalkeeper in the history of the British game, and fellow goalkeepers Thibaut Courtois and even Jan Oblak experienced similarly difficult starts at Real and Atletico Madrid. Without further ado then, here are 7 mega signings, in terms of transfer fees, who made terrible starts at their new clubs. 7th. Luca Yovic. Rasmus Hojlund might be struggling for goals at the midway point of this season, but he has already scored over twice as many goals as Luka Jović did in his first season at Real Madrid. In fairness, that's not hard. Unlike Hojlund, who only scored 9 Serie A goals for Atalanta and 10 in all competitions last season, Jovic joined Real Madrid for a massive €60 million transfer fee, fresh off the back of a season in which he had scored 17 goals in 32 games for Eintracht Frankfurt in the Bundesliga, putting him 3rd in the division's scoring charts, and 27 goals in 48 games in all competitions, putting him among Europe's most prolific scorers that season. Jovic was only actually on loan at Eintracht at the time, but the Germans had a purchase option on Jovic, reportedly valued at just €7 million. Unsurprisingly, in April 2019, they triggered that option, knowing full well that Jovic was likely to be on the move again in a matter of weeks, given how well he'd played. Sure enough, Jovic's €60 million move to Real Madrid saw Eintracht profit to the tune of €35 million in just 6 weeks, with the remaining €18 million going to Jovic's former club Benfica as part of his sell-on clause. Signed by Real Madrid to provide competition for, rotation with, and potentially succeed Karim Benzema, Jovic is a totally different profile of forward to the Frenchman. Whereas Benzema works tirelessly, likes to drop deep, and is involved in all phases of play, Jovic is much more of an old-school poacher who would dip in and out of Eintracht games, but invariably popped up with a goal. Jovic was unlikely to ever replace Benzema in terms of profile then, but Madrid probably hoped that he would at least be alright in the poaching part. In reality, Jovic scored just 1 goal in his first 20 games at the Bernabeu, and scored a grand total of 2 goals in 27 games across the entirety of his debut campaign. Jovic was outscored that season by Raphael Varane, so it wasn't a great surprise to see him return to Eintracht on loan the following season. After another miserable season back in Madrid, taking Jovic's record in the Spanish capital to just 3 goals in 51 games, Los Blancos decided to cut their losses, allowing Jovic to join Fiorentina on a free transfer just 3 years into a 6-year contract after paying €60 million to sign him, which I think probably makes him one of the worst signings of all time. Jovic struck 6 times in Florence last season and has since joined AC Milan, also on a free, where he has scored 2 goals in 12 games so far this season. 6th. Renato Sanchez. This feels harsh on Renato Sanchez, who was so young when he signed for Bayern Munich, but the reality is that the size of his fee combined with his performances in Bavaria mean that he perfectly meets the criteria. Sanchez came through the youth ranks at Benfica, who signed him for €750 and 25 footballs from his local youth team at Guias de Mosquera at the age of 8. Sanchez's next move would be for a slightly larger fee. In the season in which Sanchez made his first team debut, 2015-16, he made a whopping 35 appearances, winning the Primera Liga Breakthrough Player of the Year award as one of Benfica's star men in a League and Cup double winning campaign. His performances, as an 18-year-old, made him one of the most sought-after players in Europe, and before their season had even concluded, Bayern Munich had already agreed a deal to sign Sanchez for a potential €80 million. Just €35 million of that was paid up front, with the remaining €45 million being clause-based add-ons. But at that time, it meant that Sanchez was potentially the 5th most expensive footballer of all time, trailing only Cristiano Ronaldo, Gareth Bale, Neymar and Luis Suarez. Bayern must have felt vindicated watching Euro 2016, where Sanchez went from starting the tournament on the bench to starring in the quarter-final, semi-final and the final, as Portugal won their first and still their only major tournament. The Golden Boy Award followed, but in his debut campaign at the Allianz Arena, adjusting to a new league, language and culture at a very young age, Sanchez was distinctly underwhelming. He seemed to lack the energy, explosivity and confidence that had seen him light up Euro 2016, possibly hampered by a hamstring injury, which he had picked up at the Euros. No further injuries followed that season, but Sanchez only started 6 Bundesliga games, and Bayern legend Lothar Matthäus rather cruelly singled him out as one of Bayern's worst performers. Sanchez was no better on loan at Swansea City the following season, where he did struggle with injuries and was relegated, and Bayern ended up selling him to Lille in 2019 for just €20 million. Aged 26 now, Sanchez is currently on loan from PSG at Roma. 5th, Joelinton. A tale of how things can turn around for Rasmus Hojlund. Joelinton might be the flavour of the month in the Northeast these days, but we ought not forget just how bad he was when he first joined the club. There were, it must be said, some extenuating circumstances. Joelinton joined Newcastle United for a club record fee of £40 million in the summer of 2019, which might be the sort of money that Newcastle's Saudi overlords are happy to throw at a backup right back these days, but during the Mike Ashley era, that was absolutely obscene. It effectively doubled Newcastle's existing club record fee, which was the £21 million that they paid for Miguel Almiron just 6 months earlier. Joelinton arrived from Hoffenheim, where it's often said that he didn't play as a centre-forward. That's not strictly true, though Joelinton was certainly never an out-and-out number 9. Julian Nagelsmann played Joelinton in a variety of different positions in a flexible system at Hoffenheim, typically in some variation of a front 3. That included playing Joelinton out wide in a traditional front 3, through the middle in a 2 with a number 10 in behind them, or sometimes as the number 10 himself. One thing is for sure though, Joelinton was never Hoffenheim's primary goal threat, only bagging 7 goals in the Bundesliga and 11 in all competitions, while Isaac Belfodil and Andre Kramaric scored 17 and 22 apiece. Newcastle seemingly signed Joelinton in the hope that he would somehow morph into the complete forward, capable of leading their line and scoring a hatful of goals. Steve Bruce therefore persisted with Joelinton as a centre-forward for an entire campaign, in which the Brazilian scored just 1 goal in his first 29 games, and only 2 all season, despite featuring in every single one of Newcastle's 38 Premier League matches. In fairness to Bruce, his only alternatives were a nearly permanently injured Andy Carroll and Dwight Gale, but it was a season which didn't reflect particularly well on Joelinton, Bruce, or Newcastle themselves. Of course, Newcastle have since signed some actual strikers. Eddie Howe has converted the Brazilian to perform brilliantly in a midfield 3, and his dreadful debut campaign has been all but forgotten, except on this channel. 4th, Richarlison. Sticking with Brazilians who couldn't hit a barn door in the Premier League upon signing for a new club, Richarlison cost even more money than Joelinton. Unlike Joelinton though, Richarlison had a track record of scoring goals in the Premier League. Though never in Golden Boot contention, Richarlison hit double figures in each of his 4 seasons at Everton, scoring 53 goals in 152 games in all competitions, so a better than 1 in 3 record overall. Surely then, at Tottenham, a team battling for Champions League qualification rather than to avoid the drop, with Harry Kane and Son Heung-min as teammates, instead of Solomon Rondon and Damari Gray, Richarlison was bound to be much more prolific. That's presumably what Tottenham hoped, given the fact that they paid a potential £60 million to sign Richarlison, $50 million of that up front, and $10 million in future add-ons, making him the club's second most expensive signing of all time. As with their most expensive though, Tanguy and Ndombele, Richarlison made a bit of a slow start. In fact, that's putting things very kindly. It took Richarlison until the 5th to last game of the season to score his first Premier League goal for Spurs, and that was the only league goal that he scored in 27 appearances. In all competitions, Richarlison managed a slightly more impressive 3 goals in 35 games, with extra emphasis on the word slightly there, with both of those 2 additional goals coming in a single Champions League group stage win against Marseille. This season, following Harry Kane's departure and the arrival of Ange Postecoglou, giving everyone a clean slate at Spurs, Richarlison began this season as Tottenham's centre-forward. 3 games without a goal, in which he spurned some glorious opportunities, saw Richarlison dropped and Son played through the middle instead. But the last few weeks have seen something of a Richie renaissance. Richarlison has scored 3 goals in his last 2 games against Nottingham Forest and Newcastle United, and it would be nice to see him turn things around like Joe Linton has. Either way though, his start at Tottenham was utterly atrocious, so he deservedly features. Third, Eden Hazard. Into the top 3, few players fit the criteria of being mega signings who made terrible starts for their new clubs better than Eden Hazard. We will start with the mega signing aspect. Following 7 years at Chelsea, during which time Hazard won more Premier League Man of the Match awards than any other player and was arguably the best player in the league, Real Madrid paid a potential €146.1 million to sign him. The €100 million upfront fee made Hazard at least one of the 10 most expensive signings of all time, and depending upon which add-ons would be triggered, potentially the 3rd most expensive, behind only Neymar and Kylian Mbappe. In his final game for Chelsea, which was the 2019 Europa League final against Arsenal, Hazard scored 2 goals and made 1 assist in yet another Man of the Match winning performance. It would take Hazard until the end of October to equal that number of goal contributions in Madrid. Having made 38 goal contributions in 52 games in his final season at Chelsea, Hazard only scored 1 goal in 22 games in all competitions in his first season in Madrid, which came in a 4-2 win against Granada. Meanwhile, his 7 assists came against Galatasaray, Granada again, Leganes, Eibar twice, Valencia and Celta Vigo. It's not exactly dream stuff from your new €100 million plus signing. Things didn't get any better for Hazard over the next 4 years, as a combination of bad luck and a lack of dedication to the sport finally caught up with him, and he was plagued by injuries. In total, Hazard's reported €400,000 a week wage over 5 years took his overall cost to Madrid to in excess of €200 million. And over those 5 years, he scored a grand total of 7 goals and made 12 assists in 76 appearances before retiring, aged only 32. Second, Mario Balotelli. Mario Balotelli, for all of the trials and tribulations throughout his chaotic career to date, has tended to start life like a house on fire when he signs for a new club. At Manchester City, he made 7 goal contributions in his first 17 Premier League appearances. At AC Milan, he scored a remarkable 12 goals in his first 13 games. At Nice, he scored 15 goals in 23 Ligue 1 games. He bagged 8 goals in his first 12 games at Marseille, and even more recently, he has made 2 prolific starts to life for Adana Demirspor. Often things have soured for Balotelli as time has gone on, but typically, his introduction contains more fireworks than his house in Cheshire in 2011. The exception, or certainly the most glaring exception, is Balotelli's time at Liverpool. Following a £16 million move to Anfield from AC Milan, where he was tasked with replacing Luis Suarez, that should have been easy enough. Suarez only scored 31 goals in 33 league games without taking a single penalty the previous season. Balotelli took 13 Premier League matches just to score his first goal, and he didn't score a single goal after that. He ended his first and only season at Liverpool with 1 goal in 16 Premier League games, and though he had a marginally better record of 4 in 28 in all competitions, those other 3 goals came against Ludogorets, Besiktas and Swansea City. It is easy to use facts to back up your argument, anyone can do that, but Balotelli wasn't just rubbish in terms of his numbers and in front of goal, he was just generally useless at Liverpool. Static, passive, and at times downright disinterested, selling Suarez and signing Balotelli saw Liverpool fall from 2nd to 6th place in the Premier League, and though replacing the Uruguayan was always likely to be impossible, they surely could have found someone who wouldn't have been outscored in the league by Alberto Moreno. First, Fernando Torres. There are different ways of assessing Fernando Torres' time at Chelsea. On the one hand, he was signed for a British record transfer fee of £50 million, which is probably equivalent to about £150 million in football now. He was broadly rubbish for the next 4 years, and then he left for nothing. On that basis, not very good then. The counter-argument is that, although Torres was, generally speaking, very bad at Chelsea, his contribution to the Blues' 2012 Champions League and 2013 Europa League winning campaigns justify his £50 million transfer fee all on their own. You can make your own minds up on that front, but one thing which can't be debated in terms of Torres' time at Chelsea is that he made a truly horrendous start. It took Torres 13 games to score his first goal for Chelsea in all competitions, having arrived in January 2011, and that was the only goal that he scored in 18 appearances for Chelsea in the 2010-11 season. It meant Torres scored the same number of goals for Chelsea that season as Patrick Van Aanholt and Yuri Zhukov, a 6th as many as Branislav Ivanovic, and just 1/13 as many as Solomon Kalou. Torres' poor performance, and particularly poor form in front of goal, continued into the following season, and after blanking in Chelsea's opening 4 matches, he made one of the worst misses in Premier League history against Manchester United, rounding David De Gea before somehow managing to put the ball high and wide of an empty net. In total, Torres scored 20 goals in 110 Premier League games for Chelsea, which is fairly atrocious, and 45 goals in 172 games in all competitions, but he was particularly appalling when he first joined the club. And given the size of his fee and the magnitude of that transfer, he deservedly takes top spot. There are lots of other players who could have featured in this 7, from Arda Turan at Barcelona to Saido Berahino at Stoke City, the first of whom shot up a hospital in Turkey, and the latter who went about 4 years without scoring a single goal for the Potters, plus Mason Mount and Andre Onana at Manchester United this season, and almost everyone Chelsea have signed since Todd Boehly arrived: Kalidou Koulibaly, Mikhailo Mudryk, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Marc Cucurella. The list is a long one. But those are my 7, which I sincerely hope you enjoyed. Hit the like button if that was the case, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and it goes without saying, make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on for both this channel and my second channel, Alfie Potsama, both of which should be about to appear on your screens now, along with a couple of videos that you might enjoy watching after this one. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram or Threads via the username at HITC Sevens on all 3, and all of those links plus a whole lot more should be down in the video description below. Cheers!